wait for everyone to join us. I'm going to put the committee groups in the chat box. If you did not get an opportunity to share which you would like to participate on, can you drop that in the chat box for me?
LaShonda, you just put the names of the groups, right? You didn't put the who's on what group, right?
No, I just put the name of the group. Everyone didn't get assigned, and so I want to make sure that I put you in a group that you're interested in and not just do a random selection.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mayor Whipple, we'll give folks a couple more minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started for the sake of time.
Sounds good.
All right, Mayor, if you want to go ahead and kick us off, we can get started and catch folks up when they join us.
We can what?
We can catch folks up when they join us. We can go ahead and get started if you're okay with that.
Sure. I actually got to find my agenda. Should have by now. So I got someone to help me out, help keep me organized, and she has things in folders. And normally I have things right out in front of me. I have my own way of organizing. And now I'm unorganized by being organized.
No problem. If you can just welcome folks to the group, and then we'll take over from there.
All right. So as I find that, welcome everyone. I believe today the overview is we're trying to develop purpose and structure so that we can be most productive with this group, and so that has a long-lasting effect beyond. I think this first round of our meetings. With that, I think today we're going to talk about or get into the 4 different subcommittees or a task force, and take it from there. So thanks again for being on. I know we're might be missing a couple people. Some people reached out that couldn't be here, but other than that, it looks like we have a good group. So I'll go ahead and kick it back to the moderators.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to walk through just briefly kind of what we had sent out before with the work plan, just to make sure we're all on the same page and take any questions that we might have. We had a few back, and I want to address all of that with the group. What we were brought in to help do is to try to make sure we have clarity of purpose for this group moving forward. So by the end of August, that there's an agreed upon purpose and mission for the work, and also what I would call a blueprint plan, not necessarily a detailed work plan for everything that will continue to happen, because we want and know this group will need flexibility as issues arise, but to make sure that there's at least a direction and a structure to get that work done in the future. So that's what we talked about at our last meeting. And what we had proposed was based on feedback to move forward with 4 work teams. And as the mayor said, one is to look at purpose and governance, which will really be thinking about issues as far as what is the formal structure of this, how is the selection and vetting moved forward, and then really kind of that mission type of statement that would drive the work. The second group is community engagement and partnerships. This was a big part of conversation. So really defining, what does that mean? How does that look like? What would be the intention of this work, and working with other organizations in the community who are already vested and have history in working with diversity, inclusion, and civil rights. The third one is the idea of equity and policy programs and services. So we talked about equity lens. What does that mean? Other communities have such a effort, and so what would that mean for Wichita? And then the last one really is talent attraction, retention, and advancement. That's language that's often used throughout our community, and really thinking about what does that mean for City of Wichita, intentionally doing that work within its own organization. So we had sent that out, asked for feedback. We had one person who had some questions, and I want to make sure to try to address those. The first one was just kind of the integrity and vetting of the work. How do we make sure that happens? And I think that is going to be one of the topics we would ask the governance and purpose group to do. It goes with structure and moving the work forward. What does that look like? City has some things in place for other groups we can share. Might need to consider other avenues, but we understand and heard that that's an issue, and we want to make sure that work belongs with that subcommittee. There also was a question raised on civil rights. How does that fit in? Is that language strong enough? Are we looking at that in this work? And so again, we're asking the governance and purpose group to do some heavy lifting on that as well, to make sure in the purpose statement that language is included and resonates as part of the purpose moving forward. And then the last question that I know of was just, again, trying to connect with the work and reform with police. And at our last meeting, I know the city manager can't be here today, but he was working with the police department on bringing several groups, representatives from existing committees, but as well as inviting members from this group that would be interested to have a larger conversation and figure out where that work lies moving forward, so that there's some structure to that, because there's other groups that are already committees of the city, as I understand it, who are helping with that too, so that we don't have duplication of effort, that it's in a single place moving forward. So that's my understanding. Are there other questions about the work plan specific? The last thing I would say, just for today, we are going to divide you into groups because we knew you had this on your calendar. In our subcommittees, we are going to define our next meeting times for each group. Our intention is to have those at different times, and that everybody is welcome. So if you were really torn, like, I really want to be a part of governance, but I also really am curious about what's going on with talent and retention, you would have those opportunities to join in at different times to hear that. And then finally, this will all be brought back together as a whole, the final meeting in August. And that's where we'll kind of hit the launch from the governance group to move this work LaShonda, did I forget anything in that overview? The additions? Okay. Any questions from the whole now that we can attempt to answer? Seeing none, we've either created a mass amount of confusion or we've got clarity. So we'll find out, I think, when we go into the breakout rooms here in a minute. So hopefully we've created clarity for everyone.
So there are a couple people that are on the call that I need to identify. And so if you can unmute yourself, RGHM, and let me know who you are and what committee you would like to work on, as well as the phone number ending in 690 and the phone number ending in 227.
The phone number ending in 690 is Alan Stoker Jr.
And which group would you like to work with on today?
I'm not sure. I was wanting to. I want to work with the group with the topics that are in hand, but one that I haven't seen addressed is the way homeless people are excluded from a lot of stuff in here. So whichever group would be more likely to address some of those issues, that's actually what I would like to be involved with.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And 227 or RGHM?
Oh, great.
LaShonda, didn't know if you're muted. Yeah, both of you.
227, you're
Yeah,
unmuted.
I don't know why. I should be unmuted. It's being weird. This is Emily Schlinker.
Okay, I have you in your group. Thank you.
Thanks.
This is Chad Rico. I didn't know those were the initials that I was under.
Oh, okay. I got you in your proper group. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we are going to get ready and head into our breakout sessions. We will be in breakout sessions for 45 minutes. And so what we will do is break out into our smaller groups. We will discuss those items regarding what does success look like and start to identify goals for each of the areas that you are working in. The purpose and governance structure will look a little bit different because we are defining purpose statement and defining the structure. After we have spent time in our breakout rooms, we will come back together as a larger group and do a report out, and then we'll talk about next steps. So we will spend time in some smaller groups and come back together in a larger group in the next 45 minutes. So we will see you guys soon.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, so Misty, take it away.
So I'm going to kick it right back to you. No, I'm just joking. We are have two main questions that we want to get through today. One is, what would success look like for this group? So when we talk about community engagement and partnership, what is it that you would really want to accomplish with that? So, and I'm going to give you kind of like a 2-year time frame, right? So at the end of 2 years, if this work is successful, what would look different, feel different, behave different in our community? And you guys really are the community outreach, community connection work team that we're looking at here. And then the other question that we will have today are kind of, what are the big broad topics? We're not going to spend our time wordsmithing goals or strategies type of things, but we had some ideas before. I know Dee sent out the work plan in a Word document. where we had pulled in some ideas that had been generated before, such as making sure in leadership positions there was diversity in those, that there would be training programs about what this might look like within our community, cultural shift. So would we do a campaign? Would we do education? What might that look like? And then youth engagement was another big topic. You all, those are just launching pads. Those are not like directions. Those are just topics you may want to talk about. And maybe before I launch the first question, this I know has been a part of your conversation from before, that this isn't there are many groups doing this work out there, and that we aren't trying to create a silo or go it alone impact here. So any words you'd like to share, and then we can dive into that first question.
Yeah, pretty much. I think some of the confusion with this group or with this, really this council is what's its purpose, and is in some of the fear or anxiety in the communities, are we pushing other groups out? You know, is what we're doing, or are we at worst, at best, duplicating resources, at worst, trying to take over, I guess, a space that other groups currently occupy in a group, really we're unique in that we have a direct line to the policy. Sorry, Kenzie's poking me right now. Or we have a direct link to the policy branch of our government. So it's not just a group that's talking to Bob. It's not just a group that's talking, at the DAB meetings to one of their city council people. It's meant to have a bit more, I guess, effect than that, or influence than that. But I think it's when it comes to community engagement and partnerships, one of the things that we could take advantage of here in Wichita is the fact that we are so well organized, right? Like, there are a lot of community organizations out there who really have kind of their niche purpose. I think some of them overlap a little bit with goals, but overall, the ones that are thriving usually have found what they do really well, and they do that. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel or, try to duplicate efforts, which we'll never be able to do as well as a group that's already been out there doing this, it's how do we synthesize this stuff, right? So if we have, what are the commonalities or common, values within the work of certain groups? And when we translate what they're doing, how do we create purposeful policy, right? That doesn't just do one thing, but the policy might actually, at best, help out multiple goals. And at worst, if we do policy that's like micro-targeted to one area, we actually might, in the wake of that, have an unintended consequence that hurts another group. So I think this is very important. Leadership 101 is pretty much communicating with people. Like, literally, like, I have a doctorate in leadership, and I can give you guys all like the exact thing to be a good leader is like write sticky notes to people, tell them they do a good job. Like, that's like it. And what that is like you communicate with different folks and different groups. And I don't think I did a good enough job when I described it. And there was some resistance with other groups who confused what we were doing for what they were doing. So this committee I see, or this task force, is to ensure that we're not doing that we are in partnership with others to give them a level of comfort, but also learn from what they're doing, right? So like I said, it's about leadership's, being a leader is number one tool is communication. It's about opening up that communication and trying to get it clear also our purpose, that we are the advisory group to the to the policy side of our government here in Wichita, which means our power is really influence. Is we can influence the elected officials, and we have a very big, what's it called? Microphone? I don't know. We can really get information out together because we represent the policy side of the city. So that's, I think, roughly why I think this committee or task force, whatever you want to call it, is important, is because it takes advantage of what the city already has as far as organization, and also I think keeps us focused on not duplicating some of the stuff that other folks are already doing.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your clarity and getting us started here. So our first question really, when you think about community engagement and partnerships, 2 years from now, what would look different? What would you hope to see in our community? And kind of what would the role, right, really be of this committee?
It seems like there are two tracks for this, but starting with one track dealing with students, with youth, I think probably after 2 years, personally, I'd like to see something in place in the school system for educating students. But the first step would be to investigate it, as the mayor says, to investigate what is out there, to whom do they appeal, what is their goal.
Yeah, I
how
totally
successful have
misunderstood
they
how this
been.
is going to work here.
Well, Misty, can you mute?
Yeah. I am, yeah, hold on just a minute.
Is this the same each meeting?
I'm sorry, Rabbi.
The gentleman who has calling in, if you could mute your line, I do not have.
Thank you. Perfect.
There you go.
Thank
Anyway,
you.
so the first step would be to see what's out there, like you said, and to find out what their goals are, how successful they've been, what their involvement is with 259, and but after 2 years, I would love to see a school-wide program from elementary through high school of diversity and inclusion and educating kids on how to live together. The other side, of course, would be reaching out to community groups, but that's my first one, and I'll shut up.
Reba, can you share just a little bit on what you said, how to live together? So tell me more what that means, or what impact you would hope that work would have. And your vision, for future there.
2 years, a program to teach kids, A, that it is okay to be different, and B, not to anti-racism teachings, basically, anti-discrimination teachings, to teach inclusion, to teach that this is an inclusion in the old-fashioned sense of the word, rather than the modern. To teach kids that this is natural, that this is the way it should be, and so that as they grow older, it's something that is expected. When I was a kid in Indiana, I had a few African American friends, but they were the exception. And I've seen my kids growing up in 259, and I was actually surprised that so many of their friends were African American or Asian or Latino, because it was natural for them. And I'd like to see more of that with other aspects of it.
Great, thank you.
So just to jump in there might be some policy stuff too we can work with. I mean, 259 might be a little more progressive than others, but I remember reading, particularly after 9/11, I did a lot of, I have a concentration in ethnic studies, and I did a lot of research on Islam. And we actually found out that in some studies, that the Catholic schools were more tolerant of their students who were practicing Islam, because Catholicism had a very long history of understanding Islam. So we let them, go and pray and adhere to the needs of the holidays, while public schools weren't. Public schools were no, you have to wear shorts. No, you have to, during gym, like they were just not, the policies were not flexible enough to actually adhere to the religious beliefs. And I don't know if it's still like that anymore, but there might be some, and I doubt anyone who sets these policies want to be offensive. I'm sure it's unintended, but it would be very interesting if not only setting up, if we partner, use this to kind of be almost roots out into the community. If we partner with USC 259 or a school board to create a curriculum or to utilize a curriculum, also to ask to review certain policies or to get feedback. Are there school policies that are actually hindering folks from being able to, that are discriminatory?
Yes, that'd be absolutely. Also teaching the school while we're teaching the kids, absolutely.
Great. All right, so we have a real emphasis on a couple of things. One is seeing what is out there. We need to do our homework to figure out what's there, and then really thinking about how do we have early influence with youth and schools and to do that. Other
But
ideas?
actually make it an institution, make it, like I said, another forum to go against institutional racism. We have to have an institutional solution.
Yep, putting it as a part of the system. Okay.
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
I would add off of what he said. I know like a couple months back, like right after the George Floyd protests were happening, there was a bunch of Twitter threads going on about like racism in our school districts, and kind of like from a person of color and you know, Black people's experience of being in our school system. I think what he's saying is super important, because I know for me, like when I was growing up and like I would get called like slurs, like, you know, like for Mexican people, like it made me want to leave Wichita, and I left Wichita for a very, very long time. And I was really surprised when we did the survey and it showed youth engagement so low, because Wichita is at this really high risk of losing young people straight out of high school. And then when people leave for they leave for college, some of them end up just settling down wherever they went to college. And even after college, I think Wichita is at a great risk of losing a lot of great young people. So I really think figuring out ways to keep those young people in the community, because those people that we're losing are people that are really great in the community. Like right now, there's an activist like on Twitter, and she's a good friend of mine, and she was actually the person that brought to Mayor Whipple's attention the fee costs. Like she talks all the time about leaving Wichita, because she feels like she's not valued here, that diversity and inclusion isn't important here. So I think finding ways to keep the youth involved that makes them want to stay.
Kids, I just want to make sure what I heard also with you saying is talking about kind of that young adult time period too, that after high school, early college, early career time period is really important, that there be some connections in with that. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, and I think it's important because even if people do stay for college, you know, at Wichita State because it's cheaper, those feelings never really go away of like, man, I wish I'd gotten out of here. You know, man, when I finished my degree, like I'm getting out of here. Because that's exactly where I was, that I left for years, and I was in California, and it's like, that's everyone's paradise. But I ended up coming back because for some reason, I just loved Wichita more than California. But those feelings still come back every now and then of like, man, I really wish I was not here, because I feel like youth empowerment and diversity and inclusion at times isn't valued here. So that would be my input.
Thank you. And I think that's a great example where there are other groups that are in that space working, and how do we connect in with some of the young professional groups that are working. Yeah, absolutely.
But just to parry off of what Kinsey said, you know, the group, when she talked about the fee, she's referring to the Chamber of Commerce and a training that they're not training, a lunch that they are putting on where they have these speakers and this topic, and they're moving forward by actually for the first time really having a topic of inclusion to the level that this is, but then the exclusion or the I guess the you pay money so that you're a higher status to get into these topics actually kind of go against what the purpose is, which is being more inclusive. But neither here or there, because they fixed it, and I love that they did that. The other main thing is that when it was a Sunday night when I randomly saw the tweets, you know, about this, because I was tagged in one where, and I guess I'm the first like Twitter mayor, right? Like where I was able to actually, I'm gonna get Gary out of bed, call him and ask him, hey, can we make this free? And then go and kind of blunt that. But the reason why was because I don't think folks felt they had that pathway to us, right? Like instead it was more, it was this is going to happen and we're going to be angry about it. I don't think the people who were really upset felt like they would have gotten much out of just, you know, shooting me a message. And that's one of the things I think we got to change when it comes to, you moving forward, we're working with not just young folks, but also other groups who might not feel like they have that direct connection to the electeds, who might have influence over something like, like, hey, can you have some scholarships for folks who want to listen in on this? Because the channel of communication with the way that was brought to our attention, it made me realize that I don't think that everyone feels like they have that line of communication open.
Yeah, and I think that kind of talking about this broader effort, right? And you touched on it from the beginning, Mayor, was this idea of communication and connections, right? Like making part of this work maybe helping to make those bridges and helping to make those open communications, because we are all going to have challenges. We're always going to have things, right, that didn't go exactly the way or not the intention. And as you said, and it was talked about and it was addressed. So, right, giving grace and moving forward, that's a great example of the work that can be done in these efforts. So, right. So I'm going to add communication and connecting community resources as a part of that.
Yeah, I think what he said was strong also, because like, especially in the pandemic, yelling at public officials on Twitter has become like the norm. And I think that's because for so long, it would be them trying to talk to these public officials and not getting anything back. And so like, there's definitely a bridge that needs to be mended here of Wichitans, and especially young Wichitans, who feel like nothing has ever worked in their favor. Like, it is kind of that thing of like, starting a rumble on Twitter instead of just like reaching out and asking. Like, that's going to take a long time, I think, to mend, because people just feel like their voices are not important here, especially like, more disadvantaged communities. So I think what you said is completely true.
Great. Okay. There's a couple of folks we haven't heard from before we go on to our next question. Kind of what's your vision?
Yeah, I just kind of want to build off of what Rabbi and Kinsey said. I think youth engagement is huge. I grew up in Hayesville, which was predominantly white. And I, as a 32-year-old man, like I've struggled so much over the years. I'm still learning about my own racist ideals that I have come to that I grew up not thinking that they were racist. Because of my environment that I grew up in. So I think, like Rabbi said, learning about institutional racism and everything like that, that's so important. Start young, because I never got that. And I'm just now still, as like I said, as a 32-year-old man, as a 32-year-old Hispanic man, learning my own racist ideals and how to navigate those and teach others in a productive way. And like Kinsey said, I think in being a young adult, I've had so many friends that have moved away that could make such a difference, because they feel like Wichita is backwards, which I don't agree with. But even to this day, I still have people ask me, why are you still in Wichita? Why are you still in Wichita? It's so much better out there. I'm just like, because I have so much hope for this city, and I've seen how much it has grown. So even people my age, I think it would be important to reach out to and get their voices heard. But yeah, I think the biggest step would be with our youth.
So, don't want to put words in my mouth, but what I'm hearing, right, is like, you all would like to address that issue, that we want to change that image of Wichita for it is a place that values diversity and creates opportunities or provides education somewhere along about the importance of diversity or educational opportunities. Am I capturing that right? I'm trying to think about 2 years from now, our vision is what, right? Like, we've created opportunities for youth to become informed and engaged on this value, and we're starting to address it at the community level too?
Yes.
Any other thoughts on what success would look like? things that I would be reporting back on would to have an impact in a structured type of program in our school system that is embedded within that system to address issues of diversity from all aspects, and that it's how to live together, to make young people who are young adults coming of age feel included and valued as part of our community and the diversity that brings, to open up communication and connect resources to help improve the culture of diversity within our community, and to think about ways to educate and inform on that. But our big picture really is that we are a place in Wichita that is known for valuing diversity, especially for our young folks coming up. That not articulated in the way that makes it into a nice goal statement, but am I capturing the main concepts there? All right.
And I also want to kind of add the, not just in the schools and with young folks, but also I think into some of our business partners
Okay.
and private sector. I actually think that we are at a pivotal point where we can see some success into the private sector, and we're working, I guess, with Dante and with Councilmember Johnson to implement some of these strategies from the National League of Cities to not only implement more, I think, equity and inclusion at the city level, but how do we also help that go out to the private sector? And our partners right now, I think, is our main partner is the Chamber of Commerce, and trying to somewhat success would be where we see more, because leadership isn't just elected officials, right? Like, we want, I think, also to see some of these programs that are providing opportunities in the private sector to become more representative of the community. So I think that's very important, where particularly those who do business with the city, one of the things we can do, we could be more purposeful when we find contracts. Is the organization an organization that has the same values as the city has? Or is there another organization that we can contract with that has more values, their values more aligned? And especially in today's day and age, where I think that it's very easy to look this stuff up, right? To figure out what companies are sharing our values. Can we be contracting with those type of companies that are more inclusive? And also, what can we do as a city to kind of lead the way on trying to affect the standard that the private sector might have? For example, if we offer paid maternity leave, which is something I would been working on, is that going to now also trigger other companies in our area that are trying to get the type of people we're trying to get to work for them? Will they now offer that type of benefit? We have, I think, I want a non-discriminatory policy for the LGBTQ community. And you look over, and one of the resistance I get is, oh, that just sounds liberal and radical. And then I can point over to one of our top employers here in Wichita, in the private sector, and say, they have it. They have it. They're a model for us. Like, why can't we do what they're doing? Like, I think there's an opportunity to kind of push each other a little bit that allows some of this really modern progression to not only get into the city government, but also kind of bleed out into the community. So similar to what I'm hearing with youth, with utilizing the schools to try to bring in some of this education. We can also utilize our other partners that we're already connected with to encourage a more modernization of, I think, practices.
That seems crucial for the sorts of things that Kenzie was talking about, to attract the young adults, to attract them to come back or to attract them to stay. If there's no attractive employment for them, there's no reason for them to stay.
Right. And to be honest, like, we don't outgrow these values, right? Like, usually we don't. Like, my values change, don't get me wrong, but I've was quite I would consider myself progressive when I was in college, and we find that people move to areas that match their values, right? That's why politics you can actually like pretty much carve a line on progressive versus non-progressive areas, because people actually move to those places that share their values. And I think that we're losing our young talent here. It's an economic reason for us to try to keep our young talent. And these are the years when you take a job, when you're Sarah's age, not to point out Sarah, fresh grad from Wichita State, master's degree, literally can go anywhere in the world and get a great job. She's impressive. What can we do to make sure that she picks Wichita versus Des Moines, Iowa? Besides the fact it's Iowa. But what can we do, to make sure that, because when you, I think, are in that stage of life, you are looking to lay down roots for the next 20 years, right? Like, where are my kids going to go to school? And they're, K through 12. Where am I going to get the biggest chunk of my working career, where I can get the most benefits? And it should be a place that, has a zoo for the kids, but also has nightlife for mom and dad to go on date night. And Wichita can be that. I just think that we have an opportunity to grow to try to maintain that group of younger folks who are leaving for other communities.
So I want to move us into a little bit more specifics on the areas of focus or goals. And I think we've kind of melted back and forth with this. So I have kind of broad goal areas as youth and school-age children, with education and support for them, young adults, how do we ensure that value there? Kind of a real broad goal area with community connections and communication, which would include other groups that are working on diversity, nonprofits, but I think private sector too, as Mayor Whipple said, there's a lot of leaders within the private sector who have done this work. And then a fourth one that I added just based on that, what are the policy best practices for an organization or a community to be supporting or promoting? So those are kind of to get us started. Are there other goal or focus areas that you would want to include here?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about community engagement, there are community organizations with whom we can partner, either to join in their purposes or to bring them into our purposes. If we can get a half a dozen community organizations teamed up to promote a particular topic, that gives it more strength, and people feel more involved. This is a little bit more ownership.
Right.
So there's outreach to religious congregations, to communal organizations, to have a coalition of partners.
Okay.
I would also say, kind of what someone else said it before, but I'm tired and I forgot. One of the things that is super important is, I'm losing my train of thought. Hang on, let me come back to it.
No problem. No problem at all.
It's early still. It's very early.
We've all been there. Yeah.
You need a Keurig.
Yeah. Better to regroup than regret there. So no problem with that one. Yeah. Other big topical areas that we would want to be hitting on. And just so you know where this is going, right? So our next step would really to try to develop a broad goal statement and then some specific topic areas. And then at our next meeting, we'd really be looking at first step strategies. So this is for this. I always think of when you're doing planning, it's a funnel, right? So here's our big goal and our big topic. We're moving down to goals, and then we'll get to some strategies at the end. So we're winding our way down to actual actions. So
I remembered. Okay.
Good. I gave you some pause there, Kinsey. Go for it. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think another goal should, I thought about it when Brandon was talking about, how your values change. I think making diversity and inclusion not a political issue in this community is super important, because I can just, like, even you look at the pandemic, and how it's become very politicized. And a lot of people feel like their identity has become politicized by the media, by their elected officials, and how being progressive is to value diversity and inclusion, when in reality, like, diversity and inclusion should be a broad scope that everyone gets in on, not just progressive people. And I feel like my identity has been tokenized by the opposite party and my own party too often when talking about diversity and inclusion. So I think we need to like make a goal of like trying to get away from that and making sure people understand that like human rights is not a political issue. It's human decency. So I think that that's also something important with this committee, is when we're doing outreach, is, making sure that and engaging the community is like being like, well, human rights isn't a political issue. Because I so often have felt like my like identity has been politicized. So that's what I was gonna say.
Kinsey, I'm so glad you remembered what you were going to say, because that was great input into the conversation.
And she's right, where if we start kind of early talking about this stuff, I think it becomes more natural. I remember when I was, second grade, third grade, and recycling, we started learning about recycling. And now like no one's really, I think, against recycling, right? Like that's not a political topic anymore, because it's kind of something we just learned because it was the right thing to do, while maybe other environmental topics that you learn about later become more politicized, where if you kind of just have that community value that this makes sense, then I think that becomes more of a value than a political talking point. And we can hit this in different ways, where I have different reasons why I look for inclusion, but the Chamber of Commerce had a very good luncheon about how it's good for business, how businesses that embrace diversity are shown to make this much more money, right? I mean, or not that that's the reason why we should be going for this, but there are folks that look for, well, what's the economic reason for this? And there is one. So I think that, these type of values span political ideology.
Absolutely, Mary. I was thinking about that same presentation when we were talking about that. There's all kinds of ways to make this importance, right? To make this what the value and the impact this can have. Okay. So that,
I agree. I feel like everything's like, so many progressive issues are considered taboo or controversial. I'm like, why? These are just normal things like Black Lives Matter. Why is discrimination like such a controversial issue?
That gives us kind of 5 broad areas to talk about at our next meeting, which is a lot. So we have young adults, youth, communication and connection, policy best practices, building coalition or partnership around this work, and then 5, the value conversation, that it's not a political issue, it's a community value. And just because we had work done before with Project Wichita, there's some other resources there that we might look at, because that was part of what people said in our survey and people said in focus groups. I think there might be some effort to look back on that as well. So I have two more kind of questions for you that I want to hit on. Before we come back in a couple of weeks, what information would be helpful for you to look at ahead of time, or to think about? What information could we bring back from the university that's either research based, or other communities that you might have heard of, or other programs that you would like to we can help locate and share out? What could be helpful for you to move on in this process?
Yeah, I've spoken too much, but I'm going to just say a couple things real quick. First, I also wanted to add some economics to it, some economic community engagement and partnerships, to try to not just base this on religion or race, but also to economically disadvantaged populations and the homeless. And then also, I would be interested, and I'm kind of a nerd with this, but if you're going to do research, I would like to know what goals and success other cities that we're comparable to have had.
Okay.
So we might brainstorm and think like, oh, this is a real low hanging piece of fruit, and let's go obtain this, and then find out there's more to it than that. And maybe we can learn from the success and mistakes of other cities so that we can be, I think, a little more, we can start racking up some points, right? Like we can actually be a little more realistic on what changes we can make right away versus what changes will take some more time.
May I ask a question here?
Of course.
Okay. On the issue of dealing with homelessness and you asking for information on what other cities have had successful and unsuccessful programs, how would I be able to communicate that to the group as a whole? Because I have literally thousands of articles and studies in my files that I can present. I don't want to overload anybody. I want to just give, some of the ones that are the most successful or that were the biggest failures. But with my situation being that my connectivity is limited, I don't have internet, I don't have Wi-Fi, I'm working on a 3.5-year-old phone here that doesn't always work. So I'm trying to figure out how would be the best way to communicate that to the group as a whole, to get some of this information that I've tried to communicate it in the past to some people, and I don't know how it was accepted, but nothing was ever done. I do think this is addressing the socioeconomic status of people, to be able to include them and to be diverse is something we do need to think of. But I'm just trying to figure out, I've missed 3 meetings already or something because of health and connectivity issues. But how would I be able to communicate that stuff effectively to get it to where it would do the most good?
A couple of things come to mind. Is one, I'd be glad to get you connected to me, and we'd be glad to do that, and we can do that after the meeting, and I can talk to you directly to figure out how we could do that best. Would that be okay if I called you or another person on my team called you and we could figure out how to get that picked up? Because it sounds like sending it electronically is probably not our best plan, that we need a physical exchange somehow.
That would be fantastic.
Okay, we will make that happen, sir.
Thank you. I'm on mute now.
Okay, you're doing great. Okay, so I heard one volunteer to connect the information to us, and then looking at comparable cities, low-hanging fruit, and I think that'll be helpful across all these committees. Is going to be good information to share with everybody. Other information, data needs, or programs that you have heard of that you think we would want to bring back or to send out for discussion ahead of time? Anything with youth, anything with young adults, for other communities you think are doing this better or have programs in place that we might want to start pulling together?
I'm sorry, exactly what was the question again?
Any communities or specific programs that you have heard about that you would want us to look for? I mean, we can do a general search, but I'd love to get any guidance or directions from any of you of communities, programs, policy that you know of that you think it'd be great if we could look at that.
Well, I know the ADL has a program for school-age kids. I don't know how comprehensive it is, and I don't know how adaptable it is, but I know that exists.
What does ADL?
Anti-Defamation League.
Okay. Thank you. In any other local resources that you would be curious about that we might want to start connecting in, what their programs or activities might be?
I don't want to sound self-serving, but also Global Faith in Action is an organization that the mayor knows personally is involved in such things as well.
I was also going to suggest looking at some of the local Catholic churches and their models. We have a lot of Catholic churches in our area that serve the community like above and beyond. And when I was like struggling financially. They were there for me, and when I struggled with like racism at Bishop Carroll and stuff, they a lot of like the inner city quote, what people considered like the disadvantaged schools, like were always the ones I felt like that were helping the most. But I feel like a lot of them, especially the cathedral downtown, are really good about diversity and inclusion. So I would also suggest the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Wichita State. I work there, and I think if kids that are multicultural go into the Diversity and Inclusion Office, they so often feel valued that I think whatever that ODI is doing is working, and it's keeping people in Wichita, because I know a lot of people that would leave Wichita if it weren't for the connections they made in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I mean, it's called like the home away from home on campus, and everyone during the whole pandemic has tweeted about how much they miss ODI. So whatever ODI is doing, they're doing it very correctly. So
they are, yeah.
Yeah, they're the best. So I think connecting with them about what
programs and resources, great idea. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I just thought of this because Kinsey said it. Wichita State, I think, is they're very good at understanding the needs of the student body and addressing those needs. And there might be some lessons to learn there. One of them, the disability support services, also I think would be a good one to reach out to, where not just for kind of feedback on what people need, but also how to deliver some of those needs. There's a lot of confusion about what the ADA requires and what is inclusiveness of our neighbors who suffer from disabilities or have disabilities. And, I think that we could probably, especially if we're at all going to develop some type of curriculum or hope towards a curriculum, I think we just had the 30th anniversary of the ADA Act, which is a non-discriminatory civil rights act. It would be really great as a city to try to include in our future community engagement, ways that we can reach out to folks who fall into the disability category.
Okay. Other resources, research, other things that would make your work easier when we get back together the next time, because we'll really be breaking down kind of those 6 categories and trying to get some, some strategy ideas to it. So.
Hey, Sarah,
last thing, what'd you say, Mayor?
Sarah, do you have anything? We got 2 minutes. Don't worry, Bob's on vacation. Speak freely.
So my job is notes, right? So I've been taking notes. But something we've been using a lot internally is GARE, the Government Alliance on Racial Equity. So we've been using a lot of their toolkits and a lot of their resources for some of our ongoing projects. That can help with some of the policy design, I think, when we start looking at like big picture impacts. Specifically regarding schools and school children, I have some ideas, and I know of some potential sources, but I'm hesitant to bring them forward just yet because I don't know that they're going to serve more as an example than they are an actual source of research, if that makes sense. So I'm thinking of the school that's exclusively for homeless children in Oklahoma City. It's a private entity, but that is the whole population that they serve, and they also have resources for families wrapped into the schools so that it's a resource for the family, not just the child. But that's an example, not a resource to pull data from, if that makes sense. I can come up with others, but I'd need to think on which ones are going to be the most impactful for our purposes. So I can let you know.
We know where to find you, Sarah. So no worries about that. Yeah. All right. The only other kind of housekeeping thing is we will work with Mayor's schedule to make sure the next meeting that he can be there. But I wanted to ask if there's any days of the week or times that do not work for you. That I want to make sure that we have folks, our core team here, because we will be inviting other folks in, and I want to make sure that we stay true to the conversation that you had in this group. So are there any, I will send out a note once I know the mayor's calendar and try to work around that. But if there's anything we know from ahead of time we should avoid, that would be helpful. You guys are very flexible, but we will.
Tuesday mornings won't work for me.
Okay. I think the mayor would agree with that as well, usually.
Perfect.
All right. Well, we had great timing. I will give our report out when we go back in the main room, but if I miss something or you guys want to add on, please do so. We want to make sure we're capturing and communicating this. So thanks, guys. I'll see you before August 14th. So thanks for your time and your input.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. That was like the quickest 45, 50 minutes in history. I hope you guys had good dialogue in your sessions. We really had a fruitful conversation on the Purpose and Governance Committee. Big work to get done, but it was a great conversation nevertheless. So once we get everybody back into the group, what we are going to do is a quick call out to talk about what happened in each of the committees so that we can try to keep everybody on the same track as to where we are and where we're going next. Misty, I will start with your group because I know that you have to jump off for another meeting. So if you want to go ahead and just kind of give us a report out of what you guys got accomplished in your session.
Sure, thank you. And we had a great discussion, and our group is going to jump in here to add on to what we talked about. But I would say, for what does success look like, we really focused on the idea that we would be known as a community that works collectively to value diversity. So really trying to think about what that preferred future was in 2 years, that we would shift that to being working together and taking pride in valuing diversity and moving that conversation in a positive direction. Our big goal areas, we had a lot, so I'm trying to compartmentalize this down to 6. We spent a lot of time talking about youth and the need to have in place within the school system education and programs on diversity and the importance of accepting who you are and valuing that part, so that it needs to be part of the system of the conversation from the beginning and taught there. We talked about the need for young adults and the diversity within our young adult community, and making sure that Wichita is a place they want to be and want to stay and feel valued as a part of our community. And knowing that there are other organizations working on that and a great opportunity to connect with them. We talked about the intention of communication and connecting with other partners, that we would be stronger together as a coalition of several entities that are working on diversity specific topics or specific issues, and that collectively coming together would make us stronger. Talked about the need for policy and best practices, not only within the organization of the City of Wichita, but to share out with others, to be an example for that, and to have that as a part of the connection with the larger community. And that could be on hiring practices or procurement practices, but wide variety of policies that could be used. We also talked about I mentioned a list, partnering with other organizations, but also really talking about the private sector as a part of this, the leadership that is happening in private sector, and that's part of our economic need and economic diversification with that. And then to somehow talk about that this isn't a political issue. This is a value within our community, and that the diversity and recognizing individuals should not be politicized, but the diversity of who people are and the value that brings to our community, to recognize that in a way. So those are kind of our big, broad topic areas that we discussed. Folks,
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Paula?
Well, I would have thought that Misty had been included in our group because a lot of the same threads of commonality were there. I think that where we started off was that the city definitely needs to be reflective of a diverse population at all levels, not just at staff levels, but mid-management, management, and even elected from that perspective. So creating, we also talked about creating those intentional partnerships. And we broke down our talent related to, and we talked about just the attraction piece, the retention piece, and the advancement, but overall, the importance of partnerships and where we are going to attract talent and being more intentional about that. Again, one of the key elements that we talked about was the need for data. Do we even have a benchmark or a measurement of where we are now and where we need to be, and in what areas? And are we creating an organization that's equipped to know what diversity is, right? So some of that was the professional development about a culture of diversity and understanding what diversity is. And so as you think about hiring practices, retention practices, and even advancement practices, what are all those individual steps and policies and procedures that ensure that the city of Wichita is a culture that welcomes diversity and reflects the diversity of the community? And then there was a little bit of a conversation about the partners outside of the organization and being intentional in the discussions and how we review, how we interview, how we help people be put into a position to advance. But then there was a lot of discussion there towards the end about how we encourage younger people to see the city as a place, a destination for a career. If they can see people like them and that there's an opportunity in what the city does, there might be an opportunity for people wanting to come into city or public servant work. So this idea of a mentoring program, creating groups of people who identify with each other might be a way to provide feedback to the city if it was organized. And then just there was a lot of interesting conversation about the benefits themselves as the country shifts to recognizing different kinds of holidays. Juneteenth, is there some flexibility to be able to recognize that? And also, how does the city, not just elected officials, but across the board, participate in events in the community, the Juneteenth parade, those kinds of things that really show that there's a commitment. I thought it was interesting that there was, some ideas about listening tours within the city to really gauge how people are feeling about this topic of diversity and how they feel about it within the organization. So there's a lot of goals that are reflective of sort of what Misty's group was talking about, but that was sort of it in the nutshell.
Awesome, thank you. Deanna?
We had a really robust discussion, and so in terms of success, we kind of backed things up before we could identify success. We wanted to have a baseline for what equity actually meant for us, and so that we could be on the same page as far as what the discussion meant. We talked about equity in terms of resource allocation and understanding of what that looks like. We also had a discussion about what that would look like in terms of potentially in terms of talent retention related to, Lawanda had an excellent example about she used the term Alaskans. And so how do you get folks to come to a place if they're not there, and what does that look like? And the potentially resource redistribution. The difference between, we also had a conversation between equality and equity, because they're not the same thing. And so what does that look like in terms of the work that we're doing? And so we also, there was one of the discussions we also talked about was looking at folks with disabilities, visual impairments, being just the basic decencies of human life in terms of just being able to get to work. And so having access to Braille and things like that. So we set that framework first, and then from there, then we determined what we thought success would look like. And so for us, in this particular group, success looked like a fair understanding and fair allocation of or an equitable resource distribution that also included discussion. Just one second, I'm going to my notes here. Success included an internal survey of what is the equity would be, having a fair engagement of what city employees think, but also other areas. Equity also meant equal engagement. We'd also talked about looking at young people in different groups. And so not just giving resource, but also equal engagement in the conversations. Success would look like in terms of creating a sense of belonging to ensure that people feel like they're a part of the community, but also that the data would reflect that sense of equity. And then equity also would include the ability to affect change in processes and systems. So after we identified that in terms of our goals, we had 3 goals that we identified. Well, one was to create a sense of community within the advisory group here, so that if they had a sense of familiarity, but also in order to be able to make decisions, it's one of those things, we're diverse within this particular group. So how do we get to know each other in order to make appropriate decisions? So creating a sense of community and equity be achieved by having a better understanding and a sense of belonging before we could affect change. The second thing was design a process where we could review city policies, processes, and procedures. A couple of ideas we talked about were, looking at the annual budget review process and potentially creating an equity fact sheet, just to raise questions and calling out those things related to equity across the different systems. And so how do we ask those questions appropriately across the different groups? And then the third area was to ensure that this advisory group had to collaborate across this advisory group to ensure that there are equitable processes. Specifically, how do we collaborate across the engagement group? How do we collaborate across the talent group and in the other groups as well, to ensure that the process is equitable, so that as we think about this, we're disseminating a similar message. And so again, a great group. If I missed anything, let me know, but I think that captured our discussion.
Awesome. So it sounds like we've been having some very collective conversations. I will share my screen with you so that you can see where we are in purpose statements. So we took the last purpose statement B, and revised it, and we are flushing out these 2 statements that you see on the screen now. And they really speak to the language and the conversation that I think I'm hearing from the other committees in relationship to creating a culture, being inclusive, looking at services, programs, and policies, thinking about it both from the internal and external perspective. So we spend a little time trying to also determine how we can be inclusive of this conversation around civil rights. And that is really the difference between the 2 statements, is this switch out between equity and civil rights. We're still flushing that through, but we hope that the purpose statement will align with all of the work that is happening in the group. And so wanted to share that with you as we continue to flush this out, as well as define the governance structure. So the rest of the time that we spent together in our group was really talking through what is the structure and how will this group be governed long term. The goal is to come up with a final document that will be presented to the mayor and council on creating a sustainable board and council that will last beyond the current elected body, so that this is something that we know will be a value. This is something that will be important to the city long term as we talk about making change within both the internal structure as well as the culture of our community as a whole. We spent some time talking about number of members that should be on this council, how they are appointed, so that we can ensure we have a firm vetting process. We talked about what the roles need to be. And as we continue to flush that out, it is our goal to have a governance structure that we will be able to present to this council to review as we move this work forward and do the handoff or the baton exchange to the next group of folks that will really dive deeper into the work that you will establish as the foundation. So great work to everyone on today. I think we were able to get through quite a bit of the process. Just to kind of give you an overview of what is to happen next, we will pull all of the information together from the committee groups so that you are able to see what all committees have defined as goals, so that as we come back together into our smaller committees, that will give you some idea how these things will intersect as we do this work. We will not meet together as a big group in the next 2 weeks. Our plan is to meet in our smaller committees so that we can really dig into the work and spend all of our time focusing in on developing out the strategies that will go under each of the goals, so that we would have a strategic document at the end of this as a tangible to hand over to the next group of folks that will continue to run with this work. So our tangibles at the end of the process will be a full purpose statement, a governance structure, and a strategic document that can help guide the work. As part of governance structure, one of the things that we have also talked about is defining these words. So we will have a space where we will be defining diversity, we will define equity, we will define inclusion, and other words that we find throughout the documents to ensure that we are all on one accord as we are defining this work, as we are working to do this work moving forward. And if we have to be agile, not if, we have to be agile, and this is a living document. So there will be opportunities for us to make updates and for us to adjust as the environment adjusts. But this is a foundational document that should guide the work as we move forward over the next year or two, so that we can stay to task and we can see and measure how we're making change and how we're making progress. So those are the tangibles that we hope to develop at the end of this process. And this is the work that we hope that you are excited about influencing as we move forward and as the city continues to look at ways to be a great partner, as well as a leader in this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so with that, again, I thank you for your time this morning. And I will turn it back over to the mayor and to Councilmember Johnson to give final remarks before we wrap up for today.
I give the opening remarks. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the co-chair, Councilmember Johnson, to give the closing remarks. Johnson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank everybody for their hard work today. I know our committee was really focused in getting the job done. I'm looking forward to the subcommittee work and what the final product will be. But again, thank you all for engaging. This has been a great experience.
All right, you will get some invites from us for the smaller committee work, and we will see you within the next couple weeks. Again, have a great day. Thank you, guys.